We trust museums to preserve history, to safeguard priceless artifacts behind glass and security guards. But what if some of the objects they protect don't want to be contained? What if they carry with them something ancient, powerful, and deeply malevolent? We're talking about cursed objects. Artifacts that, according to legend, bring misfortune, madness, and even death to those who possess them, disturb them, or even just get too close. And incredibly, some of the most famous and supposedly dangerous aritskur of these objects aren't hidden away in dusty vaults. They're on public display, in museums around the world, viewed by millions every year. From the glittering, deadly Hope Diamond, leaving a trail of ruined lives in its wake, to the chillingly preserved Utsi the Iceman, whose discovery unleashed a string of bizarre fatalities, to the treasures pulled from Tutankhamun's tomb, sparking whispers of a pharaoh's deadly revenge, and even ancient weapons and unassuming jewelry said to harbor dark forces. These aren't just stories told around campfires. These are legends attached to real artifacts you could go and see today. But should you? Are these curses real? Or just elaborate tales spun around tragedy and coincidence? Join us as we investigate the chilling histories of the world's most famous cursed museum objects. These are their terrifying stories. This is Utsi the Iceman. He's a 5,300-year-old corpse, so well preserved that his discoverers could see his tattoos and judge his fashion sense. Found frozen in the Utstal Alps, he was initially mistaken for a modern-day mountaineer. But Utsi is far older, a relic of the Copper Age. And some say he's also cursed, leaving a trail of death in his wake. This is his chilling story. It was September 19th, 1991. Two German tourists, Helmut and Erika Simon, were hiking in the Ötztal Alps on the border of Austria and Italy. At an elevation of 10,530 feet, they spotted something unusual protruding from the ice, a brown, leathery form. Thinking it was a lost and recent climber, they attempted to free the body. Little did they know, they were looking at a man who had died over 5 millennia ago. Utsi, as he came to be known, was a scientific marvel. His body, remarkably preserved by the ice, offered an unprecedented glimpse into the Copper Age. Scientists sequenced his genome, traced his relatives, analyzed his stomach contents, which included ibex meat, and diagnosed his ailments: Lyme disease, parasitic worms, and gallstones. They even determined his age at death, a respectable 45 for that era. But it wasn't just Utsi's body that was recovered. His clothing, a grass cloak, a bearskin cap, leather leggings, and shoes stuffed with grass for insulation, were also found intact, as was his equipment: a copper axe, a flint dagger, a bow and arrows, and a backpack. It was a complete Copper Age kit, offering unparalleled insights into the life of a prehistoric man. His cause of death was not old age or the freezing temperature. After a scan, it was determined that he was murdered. There was an arrowhead lodged in his shoulder. But as scientists and researchers flocked to study Utsi, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. People connected to the Iceman started to die, and the curse of Utsi was born. The first, and perhaps most poignant, was Helmut Simon, one of the hikers who discovered Utsi. In 2004, 13 years after the discovery, Simon went hiking in the same area where he'd found the Iceman. He vanished during a blizzard, and his body was later found, frozen. It was almost as if the mountain had claimed a replacement. Then, just an hour after Simon's funeral, Dieter Warnecke, the head of the rescue team that had searched for Simon, died of a heart attack. He was 45 years old, the same age as Ötzi when he died. Konrad Spindler, an archaeologist who was one of the first experts to examine Ötzi, died in 2005 from complications of multiple sclerosis. His illness was diagnosed not long after examining the Iceman. Rainer Henn, a forensic pathologist who examined Ötzi, died in a car crash on his way to give a lecture about the mummy. Kurt Fritz, a mountaineer who had helped guide researchers to Ötzi's body, was killed in an avalanche. Rainer Holz, a filmmaker who documented the recovery of Ötzi from the ice, died of a brain tumor. And finally, Tom Loy, a molecular archaeologist who made groundbreaking discoveries about Ötzi's final hours by analyzing blood traces on his clothing and weapons, died in 2005 from a blood disease that some say was diagnosed shortly after he first handled Ötzi's belongings. 7 deaths, all connected in some way to Ötzi. Coincidence? Perhaps. But the sheer number of fatalities and their proximity to the Iceman fueled the curse narrative. Now, both Austria and Italy, seeing a potential tourist opportunity, both laid claim to Ötzi due to him being located so close to the border. It was later determined that Ötzi was in fact on the Italian side. Today, Ötzi resides at the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology in Bolzano, Italy. He's the star attraction, housed in a specially designed cold cell, visible through a small viewing window. The museum dedicates 3 entire floors to him, showcasing his belongings and even a lifelike reconstruction of what he might have looked like. Is Ötzi truly cursed? It's impossible to say for sure. Correlation doesn't equal causation, and the deaths could be attributed to chance, the inherent dangers of mountaineering, and the natural progression of illnesses. But the legend persists, a chilling reminder of the power of ancient mysteries and the enduring human fascination with the unknown. This is the unlucky mummy, or more accurately, it's the unlucky mummy board. It's not actually a mummy at all, but the intricately painted lid of a coffin that once housed the remains of an ancient Egyptian priestess. And according to legend, this seemingly innocuous artifact is responsible for a string of disasters, including shipwrecks, fires, and even the sinking of the Titanic. This is its bizarre and terrifying story. Now, cursed mummies are a dime a dozen in folklore. You've got your Nesmin, whose British buyer was trampled to death by an elephant, and Kentaka Icheche, who vowed to strangle anyone who violated his tomb. But the unlucky mummy? Well, it's not even a mummy. The unlucky mummy, currently residing in the British Museum, is a beautifully crafted wooden mummy board, about 5 feet long. It's shaped and painted to resemble the deceased, a priestess of Amen-Ra, who lived around 3,000 years ago, during Egypt's 21st dynasty. Her serene face, framed by dark hair, is adorned with colorful patterns, images of gods, insects and animals, and hieroglyphs. It's a stunning piece of ancient art, but the actual mummy it once covered is long gone, lost to history. So, how did this seemingly harmless object gain such a sinister reputation? The story begins, as many cursed object tales do, with acquisition. In 1868, a group of 4 Oxford graduates on a trip to Egypt acquired the mummy board. The details are murky, but what followed, according to legend, was a rapid descent into misfortune. 2 of the men allegedly died on the trip. A third, Thomas Douglas Murray, lost an arm in a hunting accident. The fourth, Arthur Wheeler, returned to England, only to lose his fortune twice. It seemed the curse was swift and indiscriminate. As the mummy board passed from owner to owner, the tragedies continued. A photographer who captured its image died. A porter who carried it met a similar fate. Even a translator who attempted to decipher the hieroglyphs reportedly took his own life. These are the stories, at least. And it's likely that Thomas Douglas Murray is responsible for starting many of them. You see, Murray was an avid visitor to Egypt, but more importantly, was a member of the Ghost Club, where he told and retold the story on numerous occasions. By the time the unlucky mummy arrived at the British Museum, its reputation was firmly established. Newspaper articles sensationalized its supposed powers, dubbing it the Priestess of Death. And the public, ever eager for a good spooky tale, ate it up. The curse, however, didn't stop at the museum doors. Deaths were attributed to it, with museum staff and visitors alike falling victim to its supposed wrath. Any unfortunate incident, any illness, any accident was quickly blamed on the unlucky mummy. And then, things got even weirder. The legend expanded, taking on a life of its own, fueled by rumor and speculation. The most outrageous claim? That the unlucky mummy was responsible for the sinking of the Titanic. The story goes that the British Museum, tired of the constant death and disaster, secretly sold the mummy board to an American collector or museum. It was loaded onto the Titanic for its maiden voyage, and well, we all know how that ended. Of course, there's absolutely no evidence to support this claim. The unlucky mummy remained and remains in the British Museum the entire time. It even supposedly caused World War I. After being returned following its voyage on the Titanic and its brief stay on the Empress of Ireland, which also sank, it was supposedly then sold to a German who gifted the mummy to Kaiser Wilhelm II. But, as far-fetched as it sounds, the unlucky mummy never left England after the museum acquired it. It made a few trips to various exhibitions after 1990, but other than that, the mummy has remained in the British Museum. Today, the unlucky mummy is on display in the Egyptian galleries, surrounded by actual mummies and other funerary artifacts. Ironically, it's easy to miss, overshadowed by the more complete and imposing sarcophagi and mummies around it. You could walk right past it, completely unaware of the terrifying legend it supposedly carries. Is the unlucky mummy truly cursed? Or is it simply a victim of sensationalized storytelling, a convenient scapegoat for misfortune and tragedy? The answer, like the mummy itself, remains shrouded in mystery. But one thing is certain. The legend of the unlucky mummy, however improbable, continues to fascinate and terrify, a testament to the enduring power of a good, spooky story. And perhaps a warning to those who would dismiss the power of ancient artifacts a little too quickly. This is the tomb of Tutankhamun, the boy king of ancient Egypt. Discovered in 1922, it unleashed a torrent of excitement, wonder, and, some say, a deadly curse upon the modern world. This is the story of the curse of the pharaohs and the string of tragedies that followed the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb. Tutankhamun. Even the name sounds ancient and mysterious. He was a pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, ascending to the throne at the tender age of 9. He ruled for a mere 10 years, dying in the 1300s BCE, his cause of death still a mystery. But what he lacked in longevity, he more than made up for in posthumous fame. thanks to the discovery of his remarkably intact tomb in Egypt's Valley of the Kings. In 1917, British archaeologist Howard Carter began his search for Tutankhamun's tomb, funded by the wealthy Lord Carnarvon. For years they searched, finding little of significance in the already well-looted valley. Then, in November 1922, on what was to be their final season, a seemingly insignificant discovery. A worker tripped over a rock that turned out to be the first of a staircase, leading down into the darkness. Carter, realizing the potential significance, reburied the steps and summoned Lord Carnarvon. Together, they cleared the stairway, revealing a sealed doorway bearing the cartouche of Tutankhamun. It was an archaeologist's dream, an intact royal tomb, seemingly untouched for over 3,000 years. On November 26, 1922, Carter made a small hole in the doorway and peered inside, holding a candle. When Carnarvon asked if he could see anything, Carter famously replied, "Yes, wonderful things." He was looking at a chamber crammed with golden treasures, funerary objects, and most importantly, another sealed door, promising the burial chamber of the boy king himself. It took weeks to carefully catalogue and remove the treasures from the antechamber. Meanwhile, news of the discovery spread like wildfire, captivating the world. Tourists flocked to the site, eager for a glimpse of the ancient wonders. Finally, in February 1923, the sealed burial chamber was opened, revealing the sarcophagus of Tutankhamun, and within it, the golden coffin containing the mummified remains of the pharaoh. But the triumph of the discovery was soon overshadowed by tragedy. Lord Carnarvon, the expedition's financier, died just a few months later, in April 1923. The official cause was blood poisoning, resulting from an infected mosquito bite that he'd nicked while shaving. But the timing, so soon after the tomb's opening, was suspicious. The media already denied access to the excavation due to an exclusive deal with the Times of London, seized on the story. The Curse of the Pharaohs was born. And the deaths didn't stop with Carnarvon. George J. Gould, a wealthy American financier who visited the tomb, died of pneumonia shortly afterward. Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy Bey, an Egyptian aristocrat, was shot by his wife. Aubrey Herbert, Carnarvon's half-brother, died of blood poisoning. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, the radiologist who X-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy, died of a mysterious illness. The list grew, encompassing members of Carter's team, visitors to the tomb, and even relatives of those involved. Fueling the curse narrative were spurious claims and embellishments. Stories circulated of a cobra, a symbol of the pharaohs, eating Carnarvon's canary on the day the tomb was opened. Of his dog howling and dying back in England at the exact moment of his master's death. Of a clay tablet inscribed with a curse found within the tomb, later destroyed to keep the workers from panicking. These claims were almost all fabricated, or at least impossible to verify. And what of Howard Carter, the man who actually opened the tomb? He lived for another 17 years, dying of Hodgkin's disease in 1939 at the age of 64. His long life is often cited as proof against the curse. But the legend persisted, and the list of supposed victims continued to grow, expanding to include anyone even remotely connected to the tomb. The curse of Tutankhamun became a cultural phenomenon, feeding into the existing fascination with ancient Egypt and the occult. It tapped into a deep-seated fear, the fear of disturbing the dead, of violating sacred spaces, and of unleashing forces beyond our understanding. It made sense. If anything was going to be cursed, an Egyptian pharaoh's tomb makes the most amount of sense. Today, the treasures of Tutankhamun's tomb, including his iconic golden mask and sarcophagus, have toured the world, drawing massive crowds. A new Grand Egyptian Museum near the Pyramids of Giza is set to house the entire collection, bringing all 5,000+ artifacts and the body of the boy king himself together under one roof. This is the Ring of Silvianus. It's a large gold signet ring dating back to the 4th century Roman Britain. It's not particularly flashy, not studded with jewels, but it carries a dark history, a tale of theft, curses, and a connection to one of the most famous fantasy stories ever written. This is the story of the Ring of Silvianus, the ring that may have inspired Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Our story begins not in Middle-earth, but in a field in Hampshire, England. In 1785, a farmer, ploughing his land, unearthed a remarkable find, a heavy gold ring, unlike anything he'd seen before. This wasn't just any trinket. It was a relic of Roman Britain, a time when the mighty Roman Empire stretched its reach across much of Europe. The ring is substantial, almost too large for a normal finger. It has a square bezel bearing the image of the goddess Venus. The band is faceted, giving it a slightly rugged look, like a worn lug nut. And around the band, etched in reverse, is a Latin inscription, Seniciana vivas iende, which, with a slight misspelling, translates to Senicianus, live well in God. It was a common phrase, a wish for good fortune. But, as we'll soon see, this ring would become associated with anything but good fortune. The farmer sold the ring to the wealthy Shute family, who resided at the Vine, a grand estate in Hampshire. There, it became one of many antiquities in their collection, a fascinating curiosity, but nothing more. And it might have remained just that, a forgotten relic of a bygone era, had it not been for another discovery almost a century later and some 80 miles away. In Gloucestershire are the ruins of a Roman temple dedicated to the god Nodens, a deity associated with healing, hunting, and the sea. The site, known as Lydney Park or Dwarf's Hill, yielded many archaeological finds, including, most crucially, a small, thin lead tablet. This wasn't just any tablet. It was Edifixio, a curse tablet, inscribed with a plea to the god Nodens. And the curse? It read, "For the god Nodens. Silvianus has lost a ring and has donated 1/2 its worth to Nodens. Among those named Senicianus, permit no good health until it is returned to the temple of Nodens." A stolen ring, a curse, and a name, Senicianus, that matched the inscription on the gold ring found decades earlier. The connection was too striking to ignore. In 1888, Challoner William Chute, heir to the Vine estate, wrote about the connection between the ring and the curse tablet, proposing a compelling theory. He believed that Senicianus, perhaps a visitor to the temple of Nodens, had stolen the ring from Silvianus. Silvianus, in turn, invoked the god's wrath, cursing the thief and anyone bearing his name until the ring was returned. But that doesn't explain why it's inscribed with Senician vivas iende. Well, it's theorized that Senicianus had the inscription added to protect himself. But the story doesn't end there. In 1929, archaeologist Sir Mortimer Wheeler, while excavating the Lydney Park site, became aware of the connection between the ring and the curse tablet. He needed help deciphering the name of the god, Nodens. So, he consulted an expert in Anglo-Saxon languages a professor at Oxford University named J.R.R. Tolkien. Yes, that Tolkien, the author of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Just a few years after his consultation with Wheeler, Tolkien published The Hobbit, a story centered around a powerful, magical ring inscribed with an ancient language, a ring that brings misfortune to its bearer, a ring that must be returned to its rightful place. Coincidence? Many don't think so. The Ring of Silvianus, with its tale of theft, curses, and a connection to one of the greatest fantasy writers of all time, has become an object of fascination. It's a tangible link to a world of Roman gods, ancient curses, and the very roots of modern fantasy. Today, the Ring of Silvianus resides at the Vine, now a National Trust property. It's displayed in its own dedicated room, alongside a copy of the Curse Tablet and, fittingly, a first edition of The Hobbit. It's a reminder of the enduring power of stories, the way the past can echo through the centuries, and how a simple gold ring can become a vessel for legend, mystery, and perhaps even a touch of magic. This is the Hope Diamond. It's a 45.52 carat, deep blue gem, the largest of its kind in the world. It's beautiful, it's priceless, and it's said to be cursed, leaving a trail of misery, madness, and death in its wake. This is the story of the Hope Diamond and the tragedies it may have wrought. The story starts not in a palace or a vault, but 1 billion years ago, 100 miles beneath the Earth's surface. There, immense pressure crushed carbon into a crystal, a common enough process. But in this instance, something rare occurred. Boron fused into the crystal structure, tinting it a deep, mesmerizing ocean blue. Eventually, volcanic activity pushed the gem closer to the surface, where, centuries ago, it was unearthed in India's legendary Kollur mine. India was once thought to be the only source of diamonds on Earth, which drew French merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernier there in the mid-1600s. He made 6 incredible journeys to the area, and on one, he acquired a heart-shaped, 112-carat, rough-cut blue diamond. It was later named the Tavernier Violet, violet being another word for blue back then. Now some state that he stole it from the eye of the statue of a Hindu idol, but in fact, it was acquired the old-fashioned way. Tavernier later sold the stone, along with over 1,000 other diamonds, to King Louis XIV of France. The blue gem alone made up 25% of that total price. You see, the stone had something special about it. Tavernier himself, despite legends of him being ripped apart by dogs, lived a long and prosperous life, and he even spent his older days near the shores of Lake Geneva. King Louis XIV also enjoyed a good long life. He had the diamond cut down to a more fashionable 67 carats and set as the centerpiece of the French crown jewels, where it became known as the French blue. It remained in the royal family for generations, passing through the hands of kings without much of note happening. That is, until King Louis XVI, who was in power during the French Revolution. The French Revolution was, of course, a tumultuous time in France's history, and like many others, both the king and his wife, Marie Antoinette, lost their heads. The diamond is sometimes blamed for the queen's death, but in reality, she never actually wore it. So, this claim is thought to be spurious. The French blue was stolen in 1792, disappearing into the shadows of history, but only temporarily. 2 decades later, it resurfaced in London, in the possession of a gem merchant named Daniel Eliasson. It had been cut down again, this time to 44 carats, possibly to disguise it. There are some claims that it briefly fell into the hands of King George IV, but by 1839 it was firmly in the possession of a wealthy London banking family named Hope, and that's where it gets its most famous name. Thomas Hope brought the Hope diamond into the family. Then, after his death, it bounced down through heirs, wills and bankruptcies, like a gem in a pachinko machine. It went to a jewelry firm, then briefly to a Sergeant Habib on behalf of the Sultan of Turkey, who then ended up having financial problems and selling it once again. Finally, in 1920, Pierre Cartier of the famous jewelry family acquired it, and that's where the curse legend truly takes hold. By the early 20th century, the discovery of large diamond mines in South Africa had made diamonds far more accessible. They were no longer solely the domain of royalty and the extremely wealthy. Cartier, a savvy businessman, knew that to sell his unique blue diamond for the price he wanted, he needed more than just its beauty. He needed a story. So he began to promote the idea of the Hope diamond being cursed. He marked the price up substantially. There were already some newspapers that started hinting that the diamond had a dark history, and with novels like Wilkie Collins's The Moonstone and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Sign of the Four, this was an easy narrative to sell. Evelyn Walsh McLean, a wealthy American socialite, and her husband, Ned, were captivated by the story. They purchased the diamond in 1920 for $180,000, roughly $4.5 million today. Evelyn wore it to parties, sometimes on her head in a tiara-like setting, sometimes around her neck. She even, at times, let her dog wear it. She had it blessed by a priest, pawned it temporarily to help raise money for the Lindbergh baby, and was pretty open when it came to talking about the curse. Tragedy, however, did seem to follow. Her 9-year-old son was killed in a car accident. Her marriage to Ned ended in divorce, and he later died in a sanitarium. Another of her children tragically took their own life. The headlines practically wrote themselves. After Evelyn's death in 1947, jeweler Harry Winston acquired the Hope diamond along with the rest of her collection. He toured it around North America before finally donating it to the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in 1958. Winston hoped to start a collection of American crown jewels and perhaps gain a sizable tax break. And that's where the diamond now resides, from the mantle of the earth to now the US Capitol. Today, the Hope diamond sits in the Janet Annenberg Hooker Hall of Geology, Gems and Minerals at the Smithsonian. It's in a rotating case, allowing visitors to get mere inches away, if you can fight through the crowds that constantly surround it. The diamond is arguably the most popular item in the entire museum. Some claim that due to its inclusion, it has now cursed the entire country. However, the more likely theory is that anyone who is wealthy enough to own a diamond of this magnitude probably already has a whole host of unique issues. Evelyn Walsh McLean wrote that the natural consequence of unearned wealth in undisciplined hands. These are Maori Taonga. The word translates to treasured items, and they encompass a vast range of objects, intricately carved weapons, ancestral heirlooms, sacred masks, even burial grounds and natural resources. They are deeply connected to the Maori people of New Zealand, imbued with spiritual power, and some say, protected by powerful curses. This is their story. The story takes us to Wellington, New Zealand, to the Te Papa Tongareva Museum, the National Museum of New Zealand. Te Papa Tongareva translates roughly to container of treasures. These treasures, these taonga, are more than just artifacts. They're living links to the past, embodiments of ancestors and vessels of mana, spiritual power and authority. In Maori culture, certain objects, places, and even people can be tapu, sacred, restricted, and imbued with a potent spiritual force. To violate tapu is to invite misfortune, disaster, even death. It's where we get the English word taboo, thanks to the explorer Captain James Cook. Think of it like this. A tapu object is like a live wire. Handle it correctly, with respect and reverence, and it's safe. Mishandle it, and you risk a devastating shock. And that's what nearly happened back in October of 2010. The Te Papa Museum was planning a behind-the-scenes tour of some of their Maori taonga. Now, normally, these kinds of things have your standard rules. You know, no touching, no flash photography, comfortable shoes are recommended, etc. However, there was an extra stipulation added by the museum. They announced that pregnant and menstruating women were asked to refrain from participating. And that's when all hell broke loose. The public outcry was immediate and intense. Accusations of sexism and discrimination flew. The museum, however, stood its ground, explaining that the restriction wasn't arbitrary. It was rooted in Maori traditions and beliefs, specifically surrounding the concept of tapu. Many of the taonga, the museum explained, were weapons that had seen battle, that had taken lives. In Maori culture, when a warrior, a toa, dies in battle, their spirit is believed to enter the instrument of their death. These weapons, therefore, were not just inanimate objects. They were vessels of powerful, potentially volatile spirits, and therefore extremely tapu. Pregnant and menstruating women are also considered tapu in Maori culture, but in a different way. They are in a heightened state of spiritual power, associated with creation and the life force. Bringing two different types of tapu into close proximity, the museum argued, could be dangerous, a violation that could unleash unforeseen consequences, a curse. The controversy raged. The museum, facing mounting pressure, eventually clarified that the restriction was a suggestion, not a prohibition. Women could choose to participate, but they were advised of the potential risks. And then, strangely, the story just stops. Accounts detail the lead-up to the controversy, the museum's response, the public outcry. But there's little information about what happened after the guidelines were relaxed. Did any women defy the suggestion? Did anything happen? We don't know. But we do know what happened to the museum in the following years. In 2015, the museum discovered that many of the artifacts on open display had been damaged by visitors touching them. In 2016, a fire sprinkler system malfunctioned, damaging some priceless artifacts. Later that same year, a powerful earthquake rocked the entire building. And in 2018, museum staff discovered that the museum's impressive whalebone collection had become infested with a dangerous mold. Coincidence? Perhaps. The result of cost-cutting measures and deferred maintenance? Possibly. Or could it have been the result of violated tapu, of a curse unleashed by a clash of spiritual forces? The Maori taonga remind us that objects can hold more than just physical form. They can carry stories, beliefs, and power that transcend the tangible world. And sometimes those forces demand respect, a respect that, when ignored, can have very real, very scary consequences.